Assemble! Stay dandy, baby. Anaak and Endorsi have a knockdown drag-out fight. The next test is a rousing game of tag, and Rack gets to eat a big old bucket of chocolate bars. All that and more in my review of Tower of God. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another Tower of God anime review. Thank you all so much for continuing to tune in for these reviews, leaving lots of great comments and likes. If you guys want to go the extra mile, please check out my Patreon in the description box below. If you guys make a donation, I will do an anime review of your choice. I have 3 different Patreon reviews that I'm currently working on right now, so please stay tuned for all of those. But let's go ahead and jump into this episode right here, which, like the previous episodes of Tower of God, were absolutely jam-packed with lots of content. And I'm going to try my best to try and break down each of them, so let's go. First and foremost, there is Anak and Endorsi. They started having an epic battle at the end of the last episode, this test to see who's going to be able to stand at the top of these towers before they get knocked down into some sort of dark abyss. And of course, Endorsi is using her ability to get underneath Anak's green skin. The beginning of this episode was a reminder that this is a very good looking series. I love the animation and the fighting choreography. I especially love Anak's unique ability to basically use Shibisu to slide around and do all these really cool martial arts style kicks. It's really effective, and I honestly thought that this was going to take up like a large portion of this episode. I thought that this was going to be like the full-on Anak versus Endorsi episode, but actually it's just a very small part. In fact, as intense as it actually is, it actually ends in a little bit of ridiculous comedy. Some of the expressions from Endorsi and Anak are pretty funny here, as it looks like Anak is actually going to win this fight by kicking her into this dark chasm. That is until Endorsi grabs on at the last second and they both go down in the blaze of glory. It's a weird moment that shows that while there is a really tense rivalry between these characters, there is a little bit of begrudging respect in some senses. Either that or it's just the anime styling taking over and just giving us a little bit of levity in what is otherwise a very intense moment. But this entire scene is punctuated by a number of really cool things, like we get to learn a little bit more about the princesses of Jahad, about the fact that, of course, they're not exactly the biological princesses of the king, the very first man who actually climbed to the very top of the tower, and all of these princesses are sort of like representatives of this kingdom, but they also have some very strict rules which are actually placed on them, something that was hinted at in the last episode and something that's made painfully clear in this one. They're not allowed to procreate, which means they're not allowed to do the do, and they can't have any children. Basically, they are, as the episode says, a pair of shoes which can never be worn. Something that can only be viewed by the king himself, and that's pretty much the end of it. And that's when we finally get to see sort of like the pieces of the puzzle come together with Anak and her mother, how she sort of formed a relationship, had a daughter, and basically tried to have a normal family life, which is probably what led to her actually being killed in the first place. We even get a few more scenes of her and her younger daughter, the new Anak, interacting when she was much younger and getting to see that she died in this like massive fire. And as the young Anak was walking away and being led away by a mysterious individual who very well could be her father or the lover of her mother, it's kind of hard to say. The point is she ends up giving this like weird little egg-like jewel to her mother, and it's sort of the last thing that she saw here. So this is some pretty big information here, just learning a little bit more about these characters, and they were both severely injured, and it looks like they're actually going to have to rest up a little bit before we move on to the next part of the series. One, I also want to say that I just thought it was very funny that every single time Endorsi seems to lose a little bit in the series, it's always because of her shoes. She just needs to get some damn Nikes. It was also kind of strange how at the beginning of the episode they compared the princesses to these shoes that can never be worn, and then you cut to Endorsi, who ends up losing her battle because of her shoes. I don't know. It was poetic justice in a way. Either that or it was just irony, you be the judge. The rest of the episode follows the other characters as they go through their exams and their practices so they can prepare for their positions. We go back to Bam and his group who are continuing to use the power of Shibisu, and the most interesting thing here is actually the character of Ho, a character who's incredibly mysterious. Outside of his name, we don't really know much about his character, but it was shown in the last episode that he seems to be very jealous of Bam and his abilities. We even dive into a little bit of his backstory in this episode, which takes the form of a nightmare that he's actually having. After realizing that he isn't as good as using Shibisu as Bam, he goes into his room to take a rest, and we get to see that he belonged to this race of people who had these horns that were harvested by these hunters or these poachers, and it's something that haunts him even to this day. And then suddenly he hears a knock on his door. He walks out front and he finds a note that says, he wants to climb the tower, insinuating that there's someone who's going to allow him to accomplish this. He looks visibly shocked when he sees this note, so who knows what's going on here, but just by getting that little backstory and getting to learn a little bit more about him, it's making me really curious as to what his entire deal is going to be. It also makes him not exactly the most trustworthy character in the series. I'm not sure how I feel about this guy and what his overall plan is going to be at the end of the day. Right after that, we have Shibisu and Hots, who are desperately trying to find the last friends on their list. I'm really surprised that it's been this difficult for these characters, but both Shibisu and Hots are very similar in the fact that they're very antisocial kind of characters, which I think is kind of fascinating considering how incredibly different that they are. But luckily Bam and Kun are there to actually help them out, and they actually end up getting the last signatures from none other than the princesses, Endorsi and Anaak. And I love the way that they actually tempt both of them with food. Endorsi in particular, who had to use all of her money to actually heal her injuries, desperately needs some eats, and that's where these guys are actually going to come in. I thought it was really funny that Kun actually gave Hots a script to read, and he looked very uncomfortable when he was actually reading this aloud to Endorsi. As for Anaak, she was tempted with her favorite food, which is a chicken pie, and since this is an anime, this pie looks fucking delicious. I mean, I don't know what it is about anime food, but they always make it look really good. And again, it was a great moment to humanize Anaak a little bit more, outside of making her seem just like a monster who just wants revenge. But this is Tower of God, and we've got to have some tests, and that's what's going to be happening at the very end of the episode as we get ready for a rip-roaring game of tag. And while this might seem like kind of a minor thing, you gotta know, in the Tower of God at this point, crazy things happen even with child games. And what's really interesting here is that all of these people who have actually not have enough points to move on to their positions are actually going to be participating here, and a few people are actually going to be exempt from this. Rack Wraithraiser in particular, who takes a lot of pride in knowing that he's not going to have to take place in the game of tag, and basically he just gets to kick back and eat an infinite number of chocolate bars. But everybody else is going to have to participate, and they're going to be split up into two separate teams, an A team and a B team. And it looks like it's going to be a game literally of tag, where someone is it and the entire team is going to have to escape, and whoever is it is going to have to do everything in their power to not get caught, and they're going to have to escape with help from their teammates. The big twist with this test, of course, is that a ranker is going to take place in this exam, and it's none other than that character who was introduced a couple of episodes ago, whose name was Quant. I can't really tell you a lot about Quant outside of the fact that he's short, he's loud, and he seems to have a lot of confidence in himself, but he also has a hair trigger temper. He gets angry really easily, and throughout this episode you really get to see that it looks like he's not going to be as happy-go-lucky as we saw him initially, and it looks like he's going to be taking the game pretty seriously, as the first team is going to be a lot of people that we've seen before, and a lot of the main characters who were teammates before are actually going to be split up. Like Kun is no longer going to be working with Bam, but he's going to be working with Shibisu and some of the other characters here. And what I really love here is that Kun decides to take charge. He's the light bearer, and he's really great at coming up with strategies. So they actually decide that they're going to use Shibisu as bait to draw out Quant and try and take him down. Of course, none of this works even with the power of Anaak and her special weapon, the Green April. It looks like they're going to have to come up with something a little better to actually take this guy down, and as they actually trick him, he gets seriously pissed off, and that's pretty much the end of the episode. So, what's the rundown on this episode of Tower of God? This was, again, another solid experience, filled with everything that makes the entire series great, which is its solid action, its diverse cast of characters, a little bit of comedy, and not to mention a great cliffhanger ending. And during all of this, they still managed to give us a lot of solid character development from all of these people, whether it be the main character Bam, who's becoming way more confident in his abilities to actually use Shinsu and pass his tests, or even the mysterious character of Ho, who's revealing that he has a tragic backstory and also seems to have something of a malicious intent when it comes to taking down Bam and even using the power of Shinsu. There's even a small moment between Endorsi and Rachel in this episode, which again doesn't really tell us much about what's really going on in Rachel's head, outside of the fact that she is deathly determined to get to the top of this tower, and it doesn't matter if Bam is going to be involved at all, much to the anger of Endorsi, who says that she should be happy that there's someone who's going out of their way to try and find them that much. But Rachel simply does not care. One scene that I found incredibly fascinating was actually at the very end when we go to the tag battlefield, which is a really great setting, by the way. It looks really awesome. We get to see that now that Kun and Bam are not like on the same team, Kun is still really not all that, like, worried about what's going to happen to Bam. In fact, he's sort of convinced that he is going to fail this test. And what I really love about this scene is that it shows that while Kun can be a very affectionate and caring type of character in terms of looking out for Bam, he's also looking out for number one. He wants to climb the tower. He is a competitive character, and if that means leaving Bam in the dust, that's the way it's gotta be. In fact, he basically sees him as a rival at this point, which I think is just really great development on his character, and again, I can totally see why people love this character. He's so calculating and interesting, and you always want to know what's going on under that blue hair. I think the most important thing about this episode of Tower of God is that it humanizes a lot of these characters, especially at the very beginning with Anaak and Endorsi. Endorsi at first to me seemed like she was going to be kind of like a villain, but little by little, she's becoming a comrade of Bam and all of his friends, and despite the fact that she has an intense rivalry with Anaak, makes it even more extreme, especially because there's a big connection between her and the original Anaak, and that's why she seems to have such like a problem with this imposter Anaak, so to speak. But at the same time, you can see there is a sisterly relationship with all of these characters, even though they're not related at all. Maybe that was just shown through some of their expressions when they're actually falling into the chasm. It's hard to say, but moments like that, and with Shibisu and Hots actually breaking out of his stoic personality to act kind of goofy for once, and then just the big scene at the end with Kun discussing with Shibisu about Bam losing, it's moments like that that make these characters just seem so much more real, as well as making sure that they're not just one-dimensional characters. It's an amazing dance that Tower of God has been able to pull off so far in pretty much every single episode, and it did it again in this one right here. I'm very excited to see what's going to be happening in the tag test, to see how each of these individual teams are going to go, if we're going to see more major introductions from some of the other side characters, and to see if they're even going to be able to take Quant down. Like, even though Kun said that, you know, Bam is going to lose, I wonder if they're even going to be able to, like, pull it through in this test. It's going to be really exciting to see, and if anything, I think it's going to be a good excuse to finally see how far Bam has come as a character, considering he's gotten some pretty good training with Shinsu, and he's gotten really freaking good at it at this point. So yeah, another solid experience, another great episode of Tower of God, which I'm going to drop another 5 out of 5 on. So far, this series is blowing me away with its quality, its characterization, and its production value, and you definitely need to check it out if you're a fan of animation or anime. So there it is. That's my score this week. That's my thoughts. I want to get yours. Sound off in the comment section below and tell me what you thought about this episode of Tower of God. What were your favorite moments, character moments, action moments, funny moments? What do you think's going to happen in the tag test? Let's discuss all of it. Comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching this review. Please subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one. Hit that like button. Use your Shinsu power to make it happen. And again, make sure to check out my Patreon account in the description box below. You'll find information for all of that right there. So otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching this review. I'll see you all next time. And as always, stay down there, baby.